Imagine you're a striker. You've had a decent but quiet career. You've played in Scotland and you've done a few years in the Finnish league, but let's be honest, that's not quite the glitz and glamour of the Premier League. You're currently sitting on your sofa wondering if your professional football career is effectively over. And right there, between the weather reports and the latest cricket scores, is a job advert. Wanted. Non-cup-tied striker wanted for FA Cup quarter-final. Must be fit. Apply now. This isn't a rejected plot from a Roy of the Rovers comic. This is the true story of Roy Essandoh, the man who answered a teletext advert and 10 days later knocked a Premier League giant out of the FA Cup. I'm Ned Keating, and today we're looking at the most improbable trial in the history of the beautiful game. The year is 2001, and Lawrie Sanchez, who knows a thing or two about FA Cup miracles from his Wimbledon days, is manager of Wycombe Wanderers. They're in the third tier, they're having a decent season, but they've got a problem. Actually, 6 problems. Every single one of Wycombe's senior strikers are out injured. Andy Rammell, out. Sean Devine, out. They're facing a quarter-final against Peter Taylor's Leicester City, who are 6th in the Premier League at the time, but they don't have anyone to put up top. Sanchez is desperate and he's calling agents, checking out on loan deals, but everyone offered is either too expensive or cup-tied. So he does the unthinkable. He tells the club to put out an SOS, which eventually winds up on Ceefax. Now, for younger viewers, Ceefax was the internet before the internet had speed or pictures. It was blocky, it was slow, but it was glorious. Most people used it to check if their flight was cancelled or if they'd won £10 on the lottery. Roy Essandoh used it to find a job. Roy Essandoh turns up at training on a Tuesday. Lawrie Sanchez later admitted he knew absolutely nothing about the lad. Roy had just come back from a spell with VPS in Finland. He was fit, he was available, he wasn't cup-tied, and crucially for Wycombe, he had a pulse. Wycombe signed Roy on a 2-week rolling contract. Basically, if you're rubbish, you're gone before the laundry's done. Roy plays one reserve game, does okay, and suddenly finds himself on the coach to Leicester for arguably the club's biggest game in their history at that point. Leicester, meanwhile, are cruising. They've got Robbie Savage, they've got Muzzy Izzet, they've got Adi Akinbaye, and they're expecting a comfortable routine win. However, they didn't account for the guy who was hired using a TV remote control. The game is a typical FA Cup scrap. Paul McCarthy puts Wycombe 1-0 up and the shock looks on. But Muzzy Izzet equalises, Leicester are huffing and puffing, and Robbie Savage is being, well, Robbie Savage. Lawrie Sanchez gets so stressed he gets sent to the stands. He's having to watch the final minutes of the game on a tiny TV monitor in the tunnel. In the 70th minute, the dice is rolled and on comes the Ceefax man. It's now deep into injury time and a cross comes into the back post which Jamie Bates nods back across the face of goal. It's high, it's hanging, and there, rising highest above all of these Premier League defenders, is Roy Essandoh. He smashes the header home to make it 2-1 to Wycombe. The Wycombe fans go mental, the Leicester fans are stunned. And the commentators are frantically checking their notes because they have very little on Roy Essandoh. Wycombe are now in the FA Cup semi-final. A team that had been non-league 8 years prior were now in the final 4, all because of a Ceefax advert. Roy Essandoh's Wycombe career, well, it lasted about as long as the Ceefax page takes to load. He played a few more games, didn't score any more goals, and was released once the regular strikers had returned to full fitness. He never played at that level again. But he doesn't care. Roy Essandoh is an FA Cup legend. He's the answer to the greatest pub quiz question of all time. It proved that sometimes in football you just have to be fit, be available, and be ready to check Ceefax. Subscribe for more stories where the archives meet the absurd. I'm Ned Keating. I'll see you next time.